Good evening, folks. This is a Mad Painter, and I'm here with my co-host Mark Eddy and Rick. They can tune us in at www.freedomslips.com and it's Studio A. We got a good show. That was our guest there you heard during the intro. Mark, you want to go ahead and introduce our guest?
Sure. Let's see. We have a exciting show planned for you tonight. We have two guests. The first one is Brenda's boyfriend. He also goes by the name of Rick Osmon, and he's the author of The Graves of the Golden Bear. He's a frequent lecturer on America's hidden history. He has a long-running series of articles about prehistoric fortresses in Ancient American magazine. He's the bassist for Ricochet and a conference producer. And the second hour is a super special guest. Stay tuned. We're going to have lots of fun for the second hour. And Rick's going to stay on and help co-host with that one too. So, hey, Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How's Mark?
Oh, I'm fine. I've been looking forward to this show for the last few days. So
You didn't get frozen out.
Right. It's staying above freezing. Not much, but it's above freezing. So how's everything in Indiana?
Well, we stayed out of the frost zone barely the last couple of days.
And hail today.
Got a little hail and thunderstorms today. Oh, hail.
Does that mean Brenda's going to join in the conversation?
I'm going to leave.
She says she's leaving, but
I'm sure any second now my Facebook's going to start dinging from Brenda.
Yeah, you might want to mute that. You did not mention her as the co-producer and actually the instigator, main component of this upcoming conference, because she's done the majority of the work so far. I helped line up the speakers, but as far as the actual promotion and whatnot, she's been the driving force for that. So,
Brenda, was our co-worker on the Oopa Loopa Cafe. She has experience. She needs to be on and talk about that.
Good luck, but yes, she should. She's actually very adept at it, whether she wants to admit it or not.
Oh, she did a good job on TV.
She did. Yeah, she does. The very first time we set up to do some pre-tape, she was as nervous as, well, she could be. And she got over it, so that's great. It also helps to have a nice, comfortable co-host who doesn't get nervous at anything short of maybe a grizzly bear.
So what do you two have planned for this conference? When is it? Where? How do we get tickets? Tell us about it. Who's speaking?
Wow. Okay. You're going to really make me work for this one, aren't you? Who is speaking? Let's start with that because it's a very interesting lineup. I will be speaking probably a couple of times and also emceeing this shindig. But Lee Pennington, who is the founder and driving force behind not only Joe Lee Productions, a videography type outfit that goes all over the world and documents some of the strangest things you can imagine, but he's also the poet laureate for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and he is a regular at a lot of these conferences, not just this one, because this is the very first one here for the Ancient Ohio Valley Copper Conference, which is what we're calling it. But he is a constant veteran attendee / presenter / investigator at the Ancient American Conference in Marquette, Michigan, as well as MES in Columbus, and just about anything you can imagine. He's probably the most immersed of anyone in this whole thing. I've been to several conferences with him. We've been on field investigations together to some really strange and a few virtually inaccessible locations. Always interesting and always an insightful trip if Lee's along. We also had Dr. James Shears, who is an author and researcher, founder of the Ancient Earthwork Society, and their chief scientist. He's worked with just about everybody in this field of diffusion / out-of-place artifact stuff. And I had the privilege of working with him this past spring and summer, and we're going to do it some more very soon. And I do consider it a privilege to work with Jim. We also have Dr. John White, who has been a standard within the Midwestern Epigraphic Society for I don't know how many decades. John's a young man, but he's also probably the leading expert on a particular set of symbology / epigraphy sets, various symbols and scripts that appear in ancient artifacts of North America and South America. But John, go ahead.
Rick, if someone has an artifact that may have some writing on it, someone like John could look at it and help to figure out if it was some ancient form of writing.
He could certainly help. He may not be able to read it all on the spot, but he'll know who to ask for sure, because that's what he's been doing for decades. Along with other members of the Midwest Epigraphic Society, and there are chapters all over, not chapters, but various organizations, societies all over North America, not just in the U.S., who look into this stuff. And that's the other purpose of this conference, is to make people aware of the various resources for investigating ancient artifacts or ancient cultures in general, languages, take your pick. It's all part of the same big picture. Back to the other speakers, we have a guy by the name of Brian Motzinger, who is from Southern Illinois, and he is probably the most immersed in the fortresses of Southern Illinois. As you know, Mark, I've investigated fortresses along the Ohio Valley and its tributaries. Mm-hmm. But most of what Brian has been investigating is overland they'll have creeks and maybe branches, but not big rivers near these fortresses. But they stretch across Southern Illinois from Indiana to Missouri, or to the Mississippi River at least. Maybe beyond, because we have reports in Jefferson County, Missouri as well. So Brian will be presenting what is known about those fortresses. And then we have Fritz Zimmerman, who is one of the leading experts on giants in America. All the newspaper reports and Smithsonian journal entries that they deny they ever printed, but there they are.
Awesome.
Fritz is a pretty good guy. And he is an expert, a genuine expert, in my opinion. And he knows where every mound is and pretty much what was buried in it. We also have Kent Christen, who I know Mark gets Ancient American Magazine. A couple issues back, there was a cover that had a big stone head.
Yeah, Chris was a guest.
Okay, Kent.
Oh, yeah, we talked about it. It was something else.
Yeah, it is, and he'll have it there at the conference, so people can get a first-hand view of it. It is an amazing artifact. Whatever it actually represents, it's an amazing artifact. And then we also have, a guy who is Mike Dudney is what he's going by. That is actually a pseudonym. He is an expert in some of the tablets that have been recovered from various mounds, particularly in the Midwest, particularly around Cahokia. And he knows every tablet, where they were found, when they were found, who found them, where they've been housed, what museum they've been in, etc. And he has insights that probably nobody else has, because he studied them that much. So we'll have him on probably Saturday afternoon, but I'm not certain of that, depending on his travel schedule. A couple of those things are still a little bit up in the air. We have Frank Joseph coming in all the way from Minnesota, and I think Frank's been on this show a time or two, has he not?
A couple times.
Yeah.
No, maybe three. I think he was on last December and then in January.
Well, Frank and I have worked together on a few things in the past, and he likes my research and I like his research. Now, if you need to know anything about anything that's ever been written about Atlantis, Frank's the guy to talk to. And a lot of other things too, of course. He's got, I don't know if you realize it or not, but he's done interview books with old soldiers, in that case aviators, but he's done just about anything you can think of. He's done amazing research, and I haven't even asked him what he's going to talk about, and I don't really care as long as he's there. And
it'll be interesting, whatever it is he talks about.
That is accurate. And of course, Wayne May will be there. Wayne's a publisher of Ancient American Magazine. Mark and I have both been working with Wayne for, well, years now. And Wayne...
He's the man that gave me your contact when I first met you.
Wayne is a good guy. He's probably done more to promote the ideas that are, well, not just in the magazine, but that all of us are chasing than any other individual. And he has devoted time and effort and life work to making this happen, getting it into the popular perspective, so to speak. And we have a few others coming with stuff. I can't say what because we're not fully committed on it, but I believe they will. And the stuff will be very interesting. So now Wayne won't be able to bring his artifacts because he's coming directly from another gig. But when Wayne can bring artifacts, he brings several tabletops full of strange artifacts.
So, do you know what Wayne's topic is going to be?
I don't know the exact title, but it will be related to the overall conference theme, which is the ancient Ohio Valley and the copper that flowed through it in trade. That's the overall idea of this whole thing. And I'll be talking a little bit about the same topics I discuss in my magazine articles for Ancient American, which, by the way, I'm about a third of the way finished with the 5th article in that series. And I've gotten a lot of compliments on the first 4. So
yeah, they are good.
Well, thank you. I'm putting a lot of heart and soul into it because I think the information is important to disseminate, just like goods were disseminated in the ancient world, and they most certainly were. It wasn't just copper either. I'll give you a little preview of the December issue article that I'm doing, and it involves cocoa. I don't know if you followed this story, but earlier this year, an academic team published a paper in an academic journal, the Journal of Archaeological Science, number 50, showing very clearly that cocoa from Central America was consumed a lot in North America for hundreds of years before Columbus.
So there was a Central America and Ohio connection between the cocoa trade?
They specifically tested ceramic pottery from Cahokia and nearby Mississippian sites, and they showed very clearly that cocoa or cacao was a component of whatever it was drunk in that pottery. Now they're speculating, because there's no alcohol left, that it was a fermented version of cocoa. And experimental archaeology has shown that in Central America, in Mesoamerica, that was about a 5% per volume alcoholic drink, which meant that it would take quite a bit of it to give you a buzz, about like 3-2 beer. But which I drank a lot of Coors in my younger days. But the Cahokians apparently drank a great deal of it. And there's a tale by one of the soldiers who was with Cortez that Montezuma would drink 60 cups of this stuff at a meal. I'm sorry, in a day's time, not at a single meal. 60 cups of this stuff. And the cups were like 4 or 5, 6-ounce cups in today's measurements. But the nobles that dined with him would consume in total about 2,000 cups per day. That was money. That was a lot of money. Well, of course, they filled a room twice with gold, so I guess they had plenty of money.
But this drink wasn't, say, as strong as ayahuasca?
Probably not. We don't know for sure. The experimental archaeologists came up with a number. So that's the best information we have.
Okay,
so about 5%, about 10 proof. About like a really, really mild, too young wine.
Okay, so so history just keeps repeating itself then.
Yeah, I mean they had corn beer in parts of the Southwest, but there has never been any confirmed archaeological context of corn beer in the Southeast or Midwest cultures, Mississippian or Hopewellian or any of it. And that confused people because there should have been.
Okay, and Chris Feinfrock is going to be there too?
Yes, Chris Feinfrock is a film and television producer from California, and he's going to discuss some current maybes in that arena for this type of pursuit, I guess. America Unearthed has seen some pretty good success, and we all expect some spin-offs, and Chris is working towards some of that. And there are some names involved in his pitch that are pretty impressive. I can't reveal who, but a couple of them are pretty impressive.
Okay, so aside from the little tidbits of the fifth installment of your Ancient Fortresses series, you got this conference coming up. It's November 1st and 2nd with some of the leading lecturers, authors on ancient America.
Presenters, researchers, you name it. These are some of the best folks in this particular little niche. Yeah, and yes, it's November the 1st and 2nd. It is at Washington, Indiana, which is in Davies County. It is on US 50, and anybody who's read my book knows that's an important route and has been for, 3,000 years probably. But it is at the East Side Park, which is on East 21st Street in Washington, Indiana. And it's a beautiful park, great facilities, etc. And the venue is, it'll seat about 350 people comfortably. I hope everybody's uncomfortable. I want as many people in there as I can possibly get. But we are getting pre-registrations coming in. You can do that by a check to me at an address that is on Facebook. If you hunt up Ancient Ohio Valley Copper Conference on Facebook, you will find an event and all the information to get to me. But you can also send PayPal to SMNADMAN. That's the letters SMNADMAN at gmail.com. And pre-registration is $20 per person, $10 for a student. At the door, it'll be $25 for general admission, $15 for people with valid student IDs. And that's for 2 full days of some of the best lectures on the planet on these topics.
Are there any of the stone towers nearby that you've written about?
There are sites where they once were, but there are no extant stone towers within about 160 miles of here.
Okay.
There is one in the state of Indiana, and it's damaged heavily, but it's still there and recognizable for what it is.
Okay. So, how far are you from, like Indianapolis or Bloomington, some, one of the major Indiana cities?
Okay, Indianapolis Airport is 76 miles from where I'm sitting, and it's about 86 miles from Washington. St. Louis is about 3.5 hours drive, about 4.5 to Nashville, about 4 to Cincinnati, 2 from Louisville. So that can give you a pretty good idea of the traffic pattern here. There are no good airports nearby, unless if you want to do small planes, you can land at the Daviess County, Indiana Airport, and they have a pretty good facility there. If you got your own Learjet, you can put it down there.
Okay, well, it sounds like it's within reasonable driving distance of a lot of major American cities.
It's halfway between Chicago and Nashville, halfway between St. Louis and Cincinnati. So It's in the middle of nowhere. But it's in the middle of everything having to do with these topics. We're about 40 miles east of Olney, Illinois. And for certain listeners that might have a meaning, Olney is the supposed home of the Burroughs Cave and the artifacts associated with that.
So, will you be covering Burroughs Cave, or were there some copper artifacts found in there that one of the presenters will be discussing?
One of the presenters will be discussing artifacts, in particular mapstones, from Burroughs Cave. At least that's the plan. There were all kinds of artifacts that were put out from Mr. Burroughs. And when I say all kinds, I'm speaking of all different materials. There were at least 3 or 4 different types of stone, gold and slate and clay and everything but wood. I don't know of any wooden artifacts that were retrieved or sold or shown. But there were a lot of different stone and metal artifacts. But what is portrayed, depicted on those artifacts is much more interesting than the materials themselves.
Have you seen any of the Burroughs Cave artifacts?
Hundreds.
What do you think about them? Are they legit?
Some of each.
Okay.
There are some recent fakes, or recent manufacturers, however you want to say it. There are some. There are also thousands out there. There are fake constitutions out there too, dude, that are offered for sale as the real thing when we know they are not. There are replicas of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address on an envelope that is made of paper consistent with the right time, and yet they're fakes. People try to fake everything if they think
counterfeiters been around for as long as history, hasn't it?
Yeah, and maybe longer. But there were literally thousands of artifacts that Burroughs and his various partners, however you want to say it, have offered for sale to whomever could buy them. And I don't think that one guy or even a couple of guys or even a small team of guys could make thousands of these things. And it's not a matter of the artwork or any of that, because, a good caricature artist can turn one out in about 10 minutes. But that's because he doesn't have to make his own paper. if you had to make your own paper or polish your own stones, it would be a lot of work. And it's not the artwork that impresses me. It's the preparation of the materials that was so time-consuming, so laborious. It just, in my opinion, precludes any doubt that at least most of them are real artifacts. Anyway, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I believe a lot of
your mileage may differ.
No, I believe a lot of that stuff was real, and the ones that are lost because they melted them down to sell as gold is really a shame.
Well, yes, it is, but at least they had the foresight to make molds of them. And a couple of those are very interesting because one of them in particular, a couple of them, portrayed or depicts elephants on a coin or a medallion or, whatever it was. It was about 1.5 inches in diameter. And it is an Asian elephant. They said, oh, well, there ain't no way that an Asian elephant could have been in America in whatever year. It's like, really? What kind of elephants do you think Hannibal had? Because I'm pretty sure he had Asian elephants. The Romans, Claudius took an Asian elephant into Britain to scare the locals, and it worked. Those are the only ones that can be tamed to any degree, and they're the only ones that have ever been used successfully as war elephants. Hannibal almost lost his entire fleet because he tried to take an African elephant to Rome. No, it's the Asian elephants are the only ones that'll work. And you also have, elephant effigy mounds in Wisconsin and Iowa. You have elephants depicted on Mayan stelae. They're Asian elephants. So, yeah, the Burroughs Cave artifacts are very, very intriguing to me. And there will be some discussion there because, partly because of the proximity. We're about an hour from Albany in Washington. It's kind of in my backyard. I followed the story since it hit in '82, although this is starting to get interesting all by itself because Jack Ward said that he met Russ before that and knew about the cave before that. Jack's long gone. We can't pin him down on that one. Interesting story with strange twists.
Yeah, Frank wrote an article on mastodons or mammoths in Florida.
Yep.
So it's not unusual. And there's one in I think there's an elephant petroglyph in Barnesville, Ohio, too.
Yes, but there are very distinguishable differences between elephants and mammoth or mastodon. And the Asian elephant in particular, although it has some of the characteristics of the much larger mastodon, proboscis, I can't say that word, proboscians or whatever it is, the mammoth. They are much smaller. They are, in fact, domesticated. Even wild ones usually will kind of live beside man because man grows some really good, tasty crops. But in Africa, those elephants cannot be domesticated.
Okay.
And the mammoths apparently never could either. They were certainly hunted, maybe to extinction. They went extinct. Whether it was as a result of hunting or not is still in question.
Okay, Rick, since you just mentioned melting down, some of the copper and gold, you do cover that in Article 4 that is, just came out in Ancient American. You're focusing on two caves, one in Ohio, around Steubenville, Ohio, and the other one's in southern Indiana. It starts off with.
Well, actually, there's 3 caves mentioned in there. One of them was a cave full of bones near Steubenville. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Another cave full of bones was near what is now Fort Massac, Illinois. It's actually on the Kentucky side, we think. And there are several instances of these in the literature. And apparently it was a burial cave where probably the bodies were stripped of flesh and the bones put into this cave. But they're almost always in association with something of value in a large trading sense. At Fort Massac, which is just downriver from another place in Illinois, another cave called Cave in Rock. Well, the Cave in Rock quadrangle on the map is the home, and by the way, it spans the Ohio River, so it's covering both part of Illinois and part of Kentucky. It is the highest concentration of fluorspar in North America. And fluorspar was used, still is used, in smelting operations as a flux to carry off impurities from molten metal. So Cave in Rock is depicted on a lot of these map stones that we'll be discussing at the conference. Hope to be, at least. Is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, and you know, who were the people in the cave? You know, whose bones were in the cave?
We don't know. No testing was ever done. No identification was ever even attempted. They were just mentioned in the literature. So who were they? I don't know. We can speculate. I have some favorite speculations that, well, you know, they might have been the miners themselves. They might have been slaves of the miners who actually did the mining. They might have been anybody. But there were a lot of them. And in most cases, the bones were deposited in these caves over a very long period of time, because the ones on the bottom were very deteriorated and the ones on the top not so much, which is interesting in a cave because typically you'll have stalagmites growing from the ceiling down, dripping calcinated water onto everything, which kind of keeps, you know, any acid from decomposing bones. And yet the ones in these caves are still decomposing.
So are these people like post Adena and Hopewell, since they weren't buried in mounds or cremated?
Well, we don't know. We do know that those who were buried in mounds in the Adena culture were the elite of the Adena. Probably the same with the Hopewell. Almost certainly the same with the Mississippian era mounds. That was the rich people who got the big fancy funerals. Some things never change. And they were buried in their best finery. You know, today I'm wearing jeans and a camo Realtree t-shirt and cowboy boots. Now, in my case, I probably would like to be buried in something a great deal like this. But most people want to be buried in a suit and look good when they're dead. I'd rather look like I do now, you know.
I could care less what I look like when I'm dead. I ain't going to be using the body.
Exactly. Nor will I care how I'm dressed. Hell, I don't care how I'm dressed now most of the time. But my point is, the big elite funeral mounds do not represent all the members of the culture. They probably don't represent the everyday life of even the individual who is buried there. But they are buried, especially with Adena, with a great many high-value natural resources and or artifacts. In the case right near you, Mark, at Grave Creek, there were 3 burials in the mound. There was one in the upper chamber, 2 in the lower chamber. The 2 in the lower chamber obviously are older, and they have a different array of artifacts and resources with them, grave goods, funerary objects, whatever you want to call them. The upper grave, the upper tomb, I should say, and by the way, that guy was pretty tall, wasn't he? How tall was he?
It's like 7'4", something like that.
Yeah,
7'3".
he was a pretty big dude. He would have made most of the NBA very envious or nervous.
My great grandfather was 7'3".
And was he Scots Irish?
I'm German descent, that much I know, and he was a foreman who helped build the Erie Canal from New York City over to Tonawanda.
Oh, wow, he went the whole way.
Yeah, he was on the whole thing.
He was the survivor. The canal builders was another one that left a large pile of bones most of the places they went. Of course, they were being followed by smallpox all the places they went. And they left bones, usually in that case, partially cremated bones, because, well, there was smallpox. One of those exists just about 4.5, 5 miles from me with the Wabash and Erie Canal. What's really strange is it overlaid another, what I call bone pile, a hill, that was in the line of signal towers that Mark mentioned earlier. So there were old bones and newer bones all intermingled on this hillside.
That's kind of interesting there.
Were any of these bones possibly from that Battle of the Fall? Do we know anything about the dating of them? Could that Battle of the Falls be a mass extermination that explains why there's these caves are so filled up?
We can go into that. I to do this well. How far are we from a break?
About 17 minutes.
Okay.
Then I'll tell this tale. This tale comes from at least two different sources who should know. We'll start with a guy by the name of General George Rogers Clark. He's the guy who won the Revolutionary War. And everybody says, what? I thought that was George Washington. Well, yeah. Okay, George Washington signed all the paperwork. George Rogers Clark conquered the British. It's that simple. He conquered the British on the Western Front, which was at Vincennes, Indiana, and Cahokia and Kaskaskia, and every place that the British had Western outposts that could cut off, river trade, because all those places are along the major rivers. During the battle for Vincennes, the most important naval battle of the Revolution happened on the Wabash River with 6 rowboats, because they were going to resupply the Fort Sackville, which was at Vincennes, Indiana. Well, George Rogers Clark was a very good military man. And in 1799, he received a letter asking him about this stone fortress that was it wasn't at the Falls of the Ohio. It was 14 miles upriver at 14 Mile Creek. And it's called Devil's Backbone today, and it was probably called Devil's Backbone then. It's a narrow spire of limestone that is covered on the on the east and south, because the Ohio River right there actually runs almost north to south, and 14 Mile Creek. Those two streams form a peninsula. It isn't a true island, but it's almost as, or maybe less accessible than an island is, because of the very high, very steep bluffs that are on, all of it, about 210 feet above the river to the top of the bluff. And General George Rogers Clark would have recognized it as a fortress and knew that's what it was when he described it as such. But let's go into what the natives told him about it, because, well, after the Revolution and, well, a few outings against said natives, they respected him quite a bit. And they told him that this place had been the last stand of a bunch of white Indians. Well, what? Well, they called them white Indians, and they had skills and abilities that the red, or as was actually in the narrative, the black Indians, as they self-described, did not have. And that's usually perceived as metalworking and maybe some sciences that the black Indians did not really have or know how to use or really understand at all. But they did not describe them as magical powers. So it was arts, it was technology, and they understood that much. But these white Indians were, very powerful and apparently fairly rich, but they were such a pain in the ass to the rest of them that all the rest of the natives banded together and killed them. I mean, genocide right there. In 1809, there was an account of a place at Clarksville, Indiana, which is right across from Louisville, which would make it about 14 miles downriver from 14 Mile Creek, right at the falls, in other words. A sandy island out there that was covered with human bones, waist deep, and it was about 12 acres. That's how many people were rounded up and killed in that one place. But it's not the place where the battle actually occurred. In other words,
it was the prisoners?
No, they were making a run for it.
Oh.
Because they were out of resources on top of that rocky bluff that had no fresh water and, well, it had about 12 acres of tillable land, but they, you're probably talking about tens of thousands of individuals to make 12 acres, 3 feet deep.
Yeah, that's quite a few people.
Yeah, it's like Woodstock 2 or 3 times over. And they all died. And their bones were still visible in 1808, 1809. The river subsequently washed everything away. There are other instances of a similar story, another one right on the Ohio River at, Fort Massac, Illinois, that supposedly got its name, the locals say, because of a big massacre. Well, this bone cave that we were discussing earlier is in close proximity to that. So whether the Fort Massac tale of a massacre is an outgrowth of that, or if there was a separate event, it's really hard to discern because the literature just does not exist to answer that question. If it did, I'd have an answer for you. Another one is...
Now, was there any indications that these were giants?
No, not in this case. That's a whole separate bunch of people, a whole separate timeline.
Right. I wasn't sure, but, because I have heard of them wiping out the giants too,
Yes, and almost every Native American culture has that tale. That is built into them with all the rest of their lore. I won't say myths.
I just wanted to clarify that with the listeners so they knew you weren't speaking of the giants still.
Well, there may have been some intermixing there because the giant skeletons, when I say giant, I'm talking something over 7 feet. And there were a lot of them. And there were some, the Catos of Texas were supposed to be 7 foot tall, even in historic times. In 1941, the San Antonio Star published a picture of a probably Cato skull, that's Caddo, by the way, that dwarfed another human skull, twice as big. When you get into the supposed 12 and 15 footers, I'm starting to get a little skeptical, but 7 to 9 feet, there's ample evidence that those people were real. There's ample evidence in the historical literature that living giants of those sizes fought battles and were written down in history. One became a Roman emperor, 8 foot 4.5 inches. Maximinius, I can never say that right, but they're real, or they were. That doesn't mean they were, large groups of them walking around all the time, but there were certainly large human beings, and they were respected enough, whether by other giants as their peers or by other smaller stature people, they were respected enough that they got good burials, sometimes with artifacts that, fit giant hands. and I have seen some of those. I saw a hammerstone that weighed 27 pounds.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of photos of large tools, but I haven't ever laid hands or eyes on any.
Oh, they're
What's
amazing.
in museums accidentally called something else.
Sorry. I got a cough.
Oh, he hung up.
I think.
Oh, there he is.
Wrong button. Got a frog in my throat all of a sudden. Anyway, yeah, big tools, big people, big graves, big mounds. Those are all part of the.
Yeah, they try to say there are ceremonial knives and ceremonial spearheads, but they ain't fancy enough to be that.
Well, it's like, let's make a comparison on that. Do you know what a halberd is? Halbard. Halberd.
No.
Not right offhand, no.
Okay, you watch some of the old movies, particularly 30s movies, and they would pretty much get it historically correct on what the king's personal guards at the castle would be holding as their weapon. And it's somewhere between an axe on one side and a spear on the point, and a pike.
Oh, yeah.
Pike. Okay, that's a halberd. And some Native American, particularly in upstate New York and surrounds east end of the Great Lakes, they had those made out of stone, but the shape was virtually the same. Those things would bring down a man in armor. That doesn't mean they could be able to kill him with it, but they could tip him off balance. And that's one of the main reasons they were used. They were also carried by the up front lead guards of Cortez and pretty much all the conquistadors. So they're found in, Native American mounds where they shouldn't be because, there weren't supposed to be any mound builders after the Spanish got here.
You mentioned armor. A lot of people don't realize that armor actually weighed a lot.
Yeah. Still does. If you've ever put on a...
So, it was, if you could get them off balance, you had a chance.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when armor goes back as long as warfare does. And Native Americans had their own version of armor, usually made out of bones or stone. That didn't make it any lighter in weight, didn't make it any more effective. But it was more effective than not having any. That's what I say about Russian night vision equipment. By the way, I worked for the Navy for 15 years in that area. Russian night vision equipment is better than no night vision equipment at all. Sometimes. But stone armor, better than no armor at all, unless you have to walk 100 miles in it. Now, back to the halberds.
Yeah, now, just because they were made of stone is just because they didn't have the metallurgy at the time, but they still saw the potential in the design.
Right.
It wasn't an accidental design.
Correct. It was according to the conventional doctrinal archaeologists, it was a parallel development. Halberds developed on both sides of both oceans, incidentally, for the exact same purpose, to take down people wearing armor. So the Native Americans were taking down, they had stone tools to take down people wearing armor. Yeah, actually they did. And they had the armor too. There are very early accounts of French explorers encountering a war, a phalanx type troop movement war, much like Alexander would have done, except without metal tools or weapons. But they had the armor, they had the swords, they had spears, they had javelins, with a distinction between the two. They had slings with round balls, some made of clay, some made of stone.
So
How did they grind a sphere out of stone?
Me, myself, I don't believe it was parallel development. I believe there was contact.
I'm pretty sure there was contact going back a very long ways.
Rick, you do mention in your article that copper production does go back to the 5th century or fifth millennium BC.
Yes, it does.
So were people from you do give the example that people are coming from the Near East to get copper. Were they coming to Michigan to get copper from the Near East?
I don't know that they were coming from Michigan or just getting it from Michigan. I don't know who transported it. I don't know who mined it. And you can't get much of an answer out of the metallurgist of how do you distinguish it from native. What I can say is that they used a lot more copper than they could supply from local minings. They used a lot more fluorspar and other fluxes than they could get from anything local. They had cobalt glass that they could only get the cobalt out of copper using advanced metallurgy techniques. I heard a question coming up.
Go ahead and tell people about the conference again before break, if you would.
Sure. It's the Ancient Ohio Valley Copper Conference coming up November 1st and 2nd in Washington, Indiana, with 14 speakers, about 16 different presentations, artifacts, answers to questions. Great time had by all. $20 in advance up until October the 15th. You can find the details on that on Facebook. Just look up Ancient Ohio Valley Copper Conference. Or $25 at the door for general admission and $15 for students.
Now there is motel rooms and stuff like that there.
Yeah, there are a few. And they're filling up pretty fast, though. I've got to say, there've been quite a few people pre-register and book rooms from as far away as upstate New York and, Minnesota, Chicago, coming in for this. There's a Holiday Inn Express. There's a Budgetel, a Budget Inn, a locally owned called Theros Motel, which is pretty good. And they're all within easy driving distance of the venue, which is at the East Side Park on East 21st Street in Washington, Indiana. The whole festivities start at 12 noon on Saturday, November 1st. Doors open at 10:30, and we'll run into the night, I'm sure. And the next morning we start at 10 and probably run into the night again.
Okay, so, and all the authors are going to have their books there?
Yes. And there'll be some displays of artifacts. I mentioned Kent.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We're totally listener supported, so if you got a buck or two, we'd sure appreciate it. I don't know if y'all noticed that if you've been to the website, we've made a lot of changes. We now have a news site, which is revolutionradio.news/index. You probably need to come into the site and get that link, because I probably messed it all up. It's been a rough day for me. The first half of the show was Rick Osmon, who is the author of The Graves of a Golden Bear, and I recommend it. It was an awesome book. I've read it, and we got another special guest here for the second hour, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mark and let him get going with it.
Our next guest is a true rock and roll legend. He was one of the first guests on an open canvas when we were on Sunday afternoons with just a handful of listeners, but his intriguing discussions helped to build the station. He's a UFO and Mu researcher, best known for writing the song Wipeout, host of the Tiki Lounge, the Surf Guitar God. Please welcome Merrell Fankhauser. How you doing tonight, Merrell?
Doing great, Mark. It's good to be on with you guys.
I want to tell you something right off the bat. Wipeout got me expelled from school one time.
Probably beaten on the desk.
Beaten on the desk.
Yeah, I've heard that one before.
Hey, I have a question. Have you ever heard of a guy by the name of the Reverend Billy C. Wirtz?
That's familiar. But
okay, he does parody songs, pretty much all over the continent now, but he kind of grew up in South Carolina area and did resorts and, fancy bars and stuff. Well, the ones he didn't get thrown out of. But he tells the story. He does a song called Mennonite Surf Party. And during his shtick of doing this song, he's talking about how they are doing Wipeout on, and he wants the entire audience to do, Wipeout just on the bar or the table. And it's a complete train wreck when everybody does it. But just so you know, it is everywhere, and it's gotten me jobs in bands. Well, recently, in fact.
Well, what surprised me was I lived on Maui for years, and I went into a store that had a lot of import stuff, and there was a top that when you ran the top, it played Wipeout, and I went, how did they license that? And I'm sure they didn't license it.
I'm sure they didn't.
They just did it.
But it's almost, I guess, is that the ultimate vindication, that you got a toy made from your work?
Yeah, that's something, a toy. Yeah.
It's like an action figure. Would you like an action figure of yourself? Well, okay. Tell me again how that's a status booster.
Well, I know one thing.
It's dropped out for a second.
He has a bunch of music that is pretty awesome. I've heard quite a bit of it, and I really like the song "Alien Talks."
Oh, great! Yeah, there's a video on YouTube if you type in Merrell Fankhauser "Alien Talk." And there's an alien in there playing drums. It's pretty neat.
He's from the planet Zorton.
Merrell, we were discussing, some of your new experiences, and you said there's an Army friend of yours that is picking up some signals from underwater off the coast of Malibu. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, that
sounds intriguing.
That all started about five or 6 months ago. Michael C. Luckman, who wrote the book Alien Rock, where he interviewed rock stars that had either seen UFOs or wrote songs about it. And he interviewed me and Mick Jagger, one of the Moody Blues, David Bowie, and a lot of people. And he sent me these images, and he said, Merrell, have you heard about this dome-shaped building they found off of the coast of Malibu, off of Point Dume? And I know right where that's at because I've surfed there. I surfed there when I was a teenager. And I remember surfers sitting on the beach and at night when the sun was going down, and some of them would hang around and some of us would hang out and make a little bonfire. And I never saw this, but several surfers said they saw something come out of the water and fly up and disappear. And then other people said they saw stuff diving into the water. Well, this was clear back in the mid to late 60s. And, I never thought anything about it. Well, all of a sudden, Michael C. Luckman sends these images to me of this building that's off the coast. It's not even that far, but the bottom slopes very steep and goes down to about 2,000 feet. Well, there's this white-colored, dome-shaped building with pillars, and it has an opening in the middle. And I just can't believe it's a natural formation because you can see there's nothing but a sand slope all around this thing, and it's sticking out from the side of the slope. And so he right away thought maybe this is an underwater UFO base because so many people had said that they had seen objects flying in and out of the water there. Well, there's this retired Army radio expert who I think was in the Second World War, and his expertise was pinpointing where the Japanese were broadcasting from on different islands. So he really has this down to a science, and he now still has radio gear, and he likes to do ham radio stuff, and he communicates with people in New Zealand and Australia. And oddly enough, he lives right up the hill. There's a hillside there with a lot of nice houses on it. And one night when he was finished communicating with whoever he was communicating with, he turned the band off slightly from where he was, and all of a sudden he started picking up these weird signals. And he honed in on them and found out they were almost in a straight line out in the ocean from where his house was. Well, he didn't know anything about this supposed building. I call it an anomaly because they don't really know what it is yet. But he was kind of a UFO enthusiast too, and he got a hold of Michael Luckman in New York. And Michael said, well, did you know there's an underwater building out there? And the guy just couldn't believe it. So they ended up sending me these signals. And I've got some of them queued up in my studio in a little bit. If you want to hear some of it, we can play it for you, and that your listeners can hear it. But what happened, I started playing these signals, and there's probably about 3.5 minutes of it. It goes through these different oscillations and things. And I've done whale and dolphin research and floated around there in the islands recording things underwater with a hydrophone. I never heard anything like this. And the guy said in all of his years of doing radio stuff, he had never heard anything. And the interesting thing was he has some kind of a radio honing device that he can hook up in his car. So he went down and he started driving up and down Pacific Coast Highway, and he found when he went 5 miles south, the signal disappeared. If he went 5 miles north, it disappeared. So he knows it's right there in a straight line from his house out in the ocean. So when they sent me these signals, I started listening to it, and I just kind of got a chill, an odd feeling. And I heard this guitar riff in my head, and all of a sudden I started hearing this whole song with these signals. So I went in the studio and turned on the machine and just played the guitar riff in because I didn't want to forget it. And then I started writing down the notation, and the whole thing came to me in about, I'd say, 15 or 20 minutes. And I could hear the whole song in my mind, and I called up my drummer and a violinist that I work with, Sal Garza, and they went, wow, this is really something. Well, the odd thing that it turned out, it was in the same key as the song that I wrote when we figured out what key these signals were broadcasting in. So I've finished the song now. I just finished it a few days ago, and it's called Signals from Malibu. And I'll send you guys a copy back so you can hear it. And, I've got a lot of people now that want to play it on the air, so we're rushing to finish it and get some radio promo copies pressed up right away. And my label that I'm on in England, Gonzo Multimedia, they're interested in hearing it too for possible commercial release. But I'm going to get it out to all of the radio stations that communicate with me regularly, and let these signals get out there and let people hear them.
That's great. Would you happen to know what the frequency of that signals were?
I remember the number 54. That's all I can remember, because when they were telling me about this, I was going, wow.
Yeah, I didn't figure you'd know the technicals, part of it, unless you had it written down or something. I was just curious.
It's wild. And my violinist, he's mesmerized by it, and he's kind of a UFO enthusiast also. And one day we had a cello. After I'd done the guitar rhythm parts and everything, we had a cello and violins come in, and I had written a score on that, and everybody walked out of here feeling like they were levitating or something. It was a very high session with no drugs, just some ice water.
So is this?
We're getting too old for that.
Yeah.
Merrell, is this like some kind of epic 10-minute long song, or is it a 4 minutes?
No, it's 3 minutes and 12 seconds long, but I've already written the only way I can explain this, guys, is it's kind of like sci-fi instrumental surf with a classical touch meets James Bond, because I did all this stuff in the 60s. Still my 60s guitar style, comes out in this. So this is 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Well, I use the signal. It comes in and out of the song, but I didn't use all of what they sent me, which was, I think maybe 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And I went, wow, there's some other good parts to this signal that I should use on something. So I just wrote kind of like a rock sort of symphony that's about 4.5 minutes long, and I haven't mixed that yet, but we're still working on that. And I'm calling that Messages from the Dome, because the Army radio guy, he felt like there's a message being sent over this flutter that you hear under it. There's a but then there's this beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep. And in one part, I'm playing a keyboard part, and the thing almost sounds like it's playing along with me, or like it's singing or something. So it's put me into new territory. I was telling my drummer, I said, we've done so much commercial music, rock and roll, psychedelic folk rock, surf music. I feel like doing something out of the box. And little did I know this was going to come along and inspire me to really get out of the box. So this is really cool. Different, and I'm inspired by it, and it's like I've been driven. I've been going in the studio about 6 and 7 hours a day, and I just can't stop.
It's amazing where we get our inspiration sometimes.
Yeah.
Merrell,
I got something. Go ahead, Rick.
A friend of mine for 40 plus years was at a Walmart, and a power outage hit, and everything kicked off, and one guy was coming back in with his battery-powered shopping cart because, he was not walking well. And the power came back on, and all these machines in that lobby, including, the little crane toy machine and the red box machine, everything was coming on again all at the same time, and he was having trouble with his cart, and they were all in a symphony together. And
wow.
My buddy Phil just happened to record all of it.
Oh, wow.
and it's an amazing happenstance.
What I was going to tell you is I've got a recording from some monks in Tibet from a cave. It's earth sounds that I bet you would enjoy.
Uh-huh. Well, I studied with the Tibetan monks. They came to Maui, and I took a meditation refuge with Karmapa, one of the lamas, and he gave me the name Lodru Jantsau. and it translates in English to Oceans of Intelligence. So I never knew if I had oceans of intelligence or that's what my dharma was, that I was to be striving for. But that inspired me to write a song called Oceans of Intelligence.
Merrell, a lot of your songs do have a spiritual lean towards them. Do you find yourself to be a spiritual person?
Yes, very much so. And it's sort of, I always had this kind of a different feeling, and when I can remember when I was a child. And even back then, I was interested in UFOs, and growing up in the 50s and all those 50s flying saucer movies and everything. And my dad was an airplane pilot, a flight instructor. And I remember being out at night on the airport and asking him, "Well, Daddy, when are the flying saucers going to come?" And that was always tied in with some kind of a belief and a spiritual feeling that I really didn't know what it was. And then in 1969, I was living in a suburb of Los Angeles, and I moved into this house that I was renting, and I was playing, in a band there. And I found this book called The Lost Continent of Mu. And I started reading that about how there was this sunken continent that the Hawaiian Islands were part of. And that sent me and the entire band kind of on a spiritual quest that ended up, and we called the band Mu. And that album has been out on 9 different labels, both foreign and domestic. And we ended up moving to the island of Maui in 1973. And that's when I went on a search on the island for pre-Hawaiian ruins that I found. And then the Lamas came along from Tibet, and it seems like I've been on that path ever since.
So that's where you get your song Dharmic Connection?
Yes, exactly. And that was... I wrote that right after my initiation ceremony on Maui.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, well, we have a lot of authors and musicians in the audience. Maybe give us a quick look at your creative process. You compress a lot of the discovery of Machu Picchu and the looting of some of the sacred sites that they're into a 4-minute song, Prospector's Moon.
Prospector's Moon, yes.
So someone like Dylan would make that into like a 12-minute long song. But you do it in 4 minutes. You make it work with all this introduction of history. Are you going for just an impression and move on to the next theme you want to bring up? What's the creative process you put into writing that song?
Well, like I was saying, I was studying this whole lost continent of Mu theory and everything, and then I was very into the South American Indian, history and their culture and everything. And it was said that a queen left the sinking continent of Mu and went to South America and taught those Indians the knowledge of the pyramids. And, the explorer Thor Heyerdahl that wrote Kon-Tiki, he went there and found things on ruins about, people coming from a submerged continent. And so I was studying all of that for quite a few years, even before I put out that Flying to Machu Picchu album in 1992. And the process, Mark, it's all kind of in my mind, and I'm not aiming at anything. It's like when I hear a song, it comes into my mind, and I hear the lyrics, and I have to write it down as fast as I can and capture the melody and then write some of the music, or it goes away.
That's when I record everything. I record even if I'm just noodling, I run a recorder. Exactly.
And an interesting thing happened in, it must have been 1976. I think it's when I was over here in California getting ready to record Calling from a Star and Dharmic Connection somewhere, or 77. Gosh, I've lost track of time. But I was friends with a wonderful songwriter and a friend, Harry Nilsson. And we both recorded the song Everybody's Talking in the late 60s. And his ended up in the movie Midnight Cowboy. Well, a lot of people know he became friends with the Beatles. And he invited me over to a party at his house, and I was recording in Hollywood, and I walked in the room, and there was John Lennon sitting over in the corner, and Harry put me on the spot and said, this is my friend Merrell from Maui, and he's going to play us a song, and I had my acoustic Martin there, and it's the only time in my life when I realized that was John Lennon sitting there amongst these other people that I got a little stage fright. And I ended up playing my song On Our Way to Hana from my 1976 Maui album. And right away, John started talking to me and said, hey, what inspired that song? That's really interesting. So the rest of the night, he and I had some really interesting conversations, and we were both baffled by where a song comes from, and we both experience the same thing where you get this like nervous feeling and you know something's going to come out, and you just got to get it down and capture it, like you said, Rick, somehow on a tape recorder or whatever, so you don't forget it. And John called it automatic writing.
He said it's actually very close.
He said it's like somebody else is writing it and you're just the channel.
Yeah.
And we were both just going, wow.
The song title should be That Magic Moment. Oh, wait. Yeah. There is one like that. Yeah, it is magic when it happens.
So to explain songwriting for me is kind of difficult, and my bass player in Moo, he said, Merrell, teach me how to write a song. And I said, gee, Larry, I can't really teach you. It just comes to me, and he goes, see, he's trying to keep it a secret. He won't let me know.
No, I know what you're saying, because I do the same thing with my art.
Yeah.
It just happens. I look at a piece of blank paper, and then it comes, It's
right.
not something you plan if it's going to be good.
Yeah. So whatever I studied, like what Mark asked me about Prospector's Moon, all of the stuff I was studying about Machu Picchu and the ruins in Peru and everything, it was all in my head, and the way the lyrics got written to the song, I was just telling the story. And interesting thing now, my current girlfriend that I've been with for 5 years was raised in Peru, and she's been to all of those ruins that I've never been to, that I only dream about, but we're planning to make a trip there so I can, go to Machu Picchu and some other places, the Nazca Lines.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I envy you that as much as I envy you sitting down with John Lennon.
Yeah, he was a nice guy, him and Willie Nelson, who I spent a lot of time with and, played with and recorded with. In fact, there's a version of us doing Wipeout together on Maui at a concert, Willie Nelson and I. But those two guys stand out in my mind as real genuine people, and there really was a real down to earth side to both of them, even though they're superstars, and John is gone now, but yeah, that was a good time.
So it's very, but Nilsson was one of the amazing artists of the period. Me and My Arrow, Nilsson Smilson, all those albums were number one, and he did a duet album with John Lennon.
Mm-hmm.
About that time.
That's when I met him, when they were doing that, and they were getting kicked out of restaurants for getting drunk and rowdy and stuff. But this was before they went on the Hollywood rampage. I guess John had only been in town a few days, actually, when I met him then. And Harry and I wrote in a little office on the corner of Cahuenga and Vine, and we wrote for a publishing company, and this was before he had a record recorded or anything, and we got $75 a week, and we would go to this little coffee shop at lunch, and we would just spoof on anything, the waitresses, whatever people were eating, or anything to try to get inspiration, because we had to write a certain amount of songs every week, good or bad, to get our $75, and we needed it. And he ended up taking a job as a bank teller downstairs in
that was the West Coast version of the Brick Building, right? Where you were.
I guess so. They kind of say that there was a lot of publishers in there, and we had a little adjoining office with a piano in it, and they furnished us both, I remember, with woolen sack reel-to-reel tape recorders.
Yes.
And we would, make our demos on that.
Very similar. I mean, Neil Diamond and let's see, Carole King were just down the hall from each other in the Brick Building.
In the Brill building.
I'm sorry, Brill Building, yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of those instances occurred. Now, everything was different in Nashville and still is. They don't do business the same way.
Right.
But the lifetime associations grow by accident in Nashville. Willie and some of those boys especially.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard it's not truly a parody song, I'll Never Smoke Weed with Willie Again?
Oh, of course. Willie's latest song is called Band of Brothers, and it's kind of interesting. He did that on Maui, and his guitar player, his Maui guitar player, was my guitar player for about 12 years, Donnie Davino Smith, and he's in that. Willie lives, on Maui quite a bit of the time now, and that's where I met him, actually. But getting back to that building in Hollywood, it was over the UCB Bank, and Harry got a job as a bank teller down there to help support him. And I remember he was so excited when Tom Northcutt cut one of his songs. It was called 1941. And it's a story about a boy running away from home and joining the circus. And then at the same time, a band called Brazil 66 recorded a song I wrote called Things. And then Spanky and our gang recorded one of my songs. So we were getting excited, and then all of a sudden, Harry got the big deal in RCA Victor Records, and their publishing company, Dunbar, hired him. And there he was on the 7th floor, and I'm still down in this other building on the 2nd floor looking up at Harry way up there. And I'd go up there and visit him and go, oh, this is what it's like at the top. And then he told a story about one night he answered the phone, and this was after his first album, Aerial Ballet, was out. And this English voice comes on the phone and goes, Harry, this is Paul McCartney. We really love your album. And he goes, who is this? And he told the guy to F off and hung up on him. And then the next phone rings, And he goes, Harry, it's John Lennon. Don't hang up. And that's when they invited him over to listen to the White Album. And he came back and told us all these stories. And then he was even on the biggest radio station in L.A. at the time, KRLA, and he told the whole story about that. And those were interesting times.
Well, I had the privilege of watching Sir Paul perform within the past year.
Oh, great.
It was the most amazing show I've ever taken in.
Yeah. It's great that someone of our age can still get out there and do that.
Yeah.
And be good.
And
really
be good at it, yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty of alternatives to that.
Yeah.
But, no, I saw them and the Eagles in the same year. So also saw Bob Seger a couple of years back. Oh, wait, on his 65th birthday. But
hey, what's wrong with being old? I resemble that remark.
Yeah.
I can still do all the same things I ever did. It just takes me longer and it hurts worse.
It takes longer to recover.
Yes.
Yeah.
But getting back...
Go ahead, Rick.
Getting back to this whole musical thing and the magic that occurs when a song actually comes together, particularly when it comes together by two or three or a bunch of people all at once, that is the truly magic moment.
Yeah.
I throw an idea at you with a riff and you come back at me with whatever that fits perfectly, and it just happens. It's in that music.
Yeah, that's what I like about real musicians playing real music, because so much of the music now it's
commercialized.
It's mechanical.
Well, it's made in computers. It's not even people playing a song all the way through. It's just pieces put together. It's done so mechanical, and pitch correction and all of that.
Like Joe Walsh talks about the digital man. He's an analog man.
Exactly. I know many people that are called analog men that still believe in analog.
Yeah, I still own a couple tape machines.
Oh, I do too. I just last October I got a call from the son of this record company that was up in the desert from me here, about 220 miles away, in the Lancaster Antelope Valley area, where Captain Beefheart started and Frank Zappa both, and we all played up there. And there was a little record company there called Glen Records, and Buck Owens had recorded in there, and a bunch of rockabilly singers in my little band, Merrell and the Exiles, a band I formed after I left the Impacts here on the coast, and instead of doing surf music, I started writing vocals, which is what I wanted to do. Well, this is interesting. You'll get a kick out of this, Rick. The old guy that had the record company out there for all these years, James Burton, Ricky Nelson, and Elvis's guitar player, actually recorded there with part of the band that backed up Ricky and Elvis too. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, he had this studio in Palmdale for years, and in 1991 he decided to close up the studio, and he moved further out in the desert towards Mojave, and he used to like to go gold mining as a hobby, and he bought this property out there, sold his house and the studio, loaded up all of his tapes and records that he had recorded for 50 years or more, put them in a freezer truck and parked it on this property and just closed the doors on it. And he passed away in 1999, and his two sons started selling everything, his tractors, his mobile home, and he had an old barn full of tools and stuff. And I think they said the truck sat there for 14, 15 years or something like that. And they said, "Hey, I wonder what's in the back of Dad's old truck." And the guy opened the back doors, and he said he couldn't believe it. It was stacked up to the ceiling with reel-to-reel tapes and records. So they tried to get a hold of somebody connected to Buck Owens, but Buck has already passed. And then they got a hold of a rockabilly singer's daughter, George Weston. He was a somewhat known rockabilly singer. And they got a hold of me, and they said, "We found these boxes of tapes with your name on it." So we drove over there, and I looked at the tapes, and I said, "Man, I don't even know if these will play. They've been in that truck all these years." But luckily, you know, it was an insulated truck, even though it didn't have any cool.
Was it half-inch tape or?
No, this was all. Well, there was some half-inch 4-track masters, but most of it was, quarter-inch 2-track.
Wow.
The mix-down masters. And so I get this stuff home, and I put it on my 2-track, and I had to start cleaning it with film cleaning pads because it had like this desert dust on it.
Yep.
And I'd clean one song, transfer it over to digital, and then the splice would break in between the next song, and I'd have to fix that. But long story short, I managed to save 14 songs that I barely remembered writing and recording. And I'm trying to figure out who all the musicians were that were playing on it. Some of the guys, this was before Captain Beefheart formed that band, and before Zappa even was formed, the Mothers of Invention. So we figured out some of the players on it, but not all.
And there was some intermixing there, I take it.
Oh yeah, it was quite a changing partners jam session.
All bands are like that at times.
And so anyhow, I've made a deal with a German label, and when you said Analog Man, that kind of sparked me into the story, because this label in Germany specializes in vinyl, and they're putting an album and a single out, and it's going to be called Merrell and the Exiles, The Lost Desert Tapes.
Wow.
So that's going to come out the end of November, and then I've got a label also interested in putting it out on a CD. And I thought there was nothing else that I recorded anywhere that, hadn't been found. And here I got a big surprise.
14 of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's
awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing that.
Yeah, there's even some surf music on it.
Something that I can.
Yeah,
but hey, I'd love to play you guys some of this, these signals that this guy recorded.
That's just what Mark was going to ask you to do.
Yeah, we're starting. Yeah, we have about 15 minutes left.
Yeah,
and we're getting some statements in the chat room. I want to hear the signals. So
all right, can I walk in the studio and I'll turn it on for you?
Okay.
Okay. I'm picking up the cordless phone, and I'm walking in the studio.
Is this the Tiki Lounge studio?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. It's where we do the TV show. Okay, here we go. that's part of it.
Well, I'll tell you what, it sure sounds structured.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, the guy that recorded this is an expert radio man. And he said he'd never heard anything like that, even clear far as back as the Second World War. And that was his job, was constantly listening to radio stuff.
Isn't that kind of what your job was too, Rick?
Well, it involves some of that. Yeah, I worked with radar, but there's some signal mixing going on there that's really weird. There's a beat frequency in part of it, there's two different frequencies that are close enough together, but distinct enough that they can partially cancel each other out, and then once in a while it slips through as a burst. You'll figure out which one I'm talking about. But anyway, those are very difficult to master, to make, to manufacture, to synthesize.
Yeah.
Something that close. It's structured, yes.
And the only thing, that I had a friend of mine that was in the Navy, and he'd listened to a lot of stuff, and underwater stuff and submarine stuff. He said he had never heard anything like that. But the only thing, out here, you guys have probably heard they do that seismic. The Navy has been using this kind of a sonar and something to do seismic testing. And, that was the only speculation, that it could be our government out there doing something. But still, it's weird that it comes right from this building. And the cover of my CD, I have put this underwater building on the cover of the CD, Signals from Malibu. You can go and Google Malibu underwater UFO base, because that's what it's gotten tagged as now. And you can see this thing, and it's a white dome-shaped building with pillars. Now, Michael Luckman from the Extraterrestrial Research Center in New York is trying to get the ship that discovered the Titanic to go out there with a robot sub with cameras in it and go down into this opening and see what's in there. So I don't know how far along he's gotten with that, but he's also so excited about it. He wants to do a concert and there in Malibu somewhere, and he's like nicknamed it an alien Woodstock. Well, it wouldn't be anything near that big, because there's no way that you could fit that many people. But he's really trying to do a concert where the artists and bands would all play some kind of space type music. So we'll see if that happens. But meanwhile, I'm going to finish off this whole, I think I'm inspired now to do a whole suite, if you will. It'll be a whole CD called Signals from Malibu. And like I mentioned, I did another longer song that has orchestration to it that has more signals than what I just played for you over the phone.
Wow. I'm looking forward to hearing how you put your song intermix the song with the signals.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
It worked really good, and it's almost like the song. I mean, the signals were telling me how to write the song, is what was so weird about it. I mean, or maybe I've just got a really good imagination, but it inspired me, So, yeah, Mark, email me your mailing address or Rick too, or whoever. I'll send you guys each a CD so you can check out what I've done.
Well, you have my current email address, and I'll be looking forward to that a lot.
Yeah, I just don't have. I'll send you a physical CD, so I need a mailing address.
Once it is open, I'd like you to get you to come on one of my Sunday morning shows and do a music show.
Now,
play a couple of them or something.
sneak preview question, if I may. Can I do this? Can I sneak up on you and say, when's your autobiography coming out?
Yeah, it should be out in December. They just gave me, they printed a copy of it already. It's coming out on Gonzo Multimedia Publishing from England, but it'll be available, everywhere in the United States on Amazon and in bookstores, and they're going to send me on a book signing tour in California to begin with. But it should be out, I imagine, around the 1st of December. And it's called Calling from a Star, the Merrell Fankhauser story. And it starts out talking about growing up in Kentucky. I was born in Louisville. I traveled to Indiana a lot. My grandparents had a farm in Lanesville, Indiana. And
barely into Indiana, but yeah.
And then in the 50s, my dad got tired of the snow, and he said, we're moving to California. And I'm glad he got us out here.
So, Merle, do you have a website or something that Facebook? We have about 2 minutes left.
Okay, my website is merrellfankhauser.com, and it's MERRELFANKHAUSER.com, and there's a short biography there, and there's a catalog of CDs and things for sale, and then you can just type my name in at YouTube and see me playing with a lot of different people, including Willie Nelson.
Okay, and you also have some interviews where you speak with Nicky Hopkins, do some interviews with him.
Yeah, those are on there, on YouTube, interview with Nicky Hopkins, and then I think there's a couple of songs from a live concert we did. Nicky and I were good friends, and he would stay at my house quite a bit, and we played and recorded together. That was another big loss for me when Nicky passed away.
Well, next time you talk to Willie, ask him if he remembers Rita Shake. Oh, wait, he probably wouldn't remember that. Anyway.
There's the end of the show. I appreciate you guys coming on and talking with us.
Thanks,
thank you, Mark. I hope you all enjoyed it. Remember, Revolution Radio is totally listener funded. You got $1 or $2, we'd sure appreciate it.
All right, you guys. Thanks for having me on.
I'll send you an address, Merle.